Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? Uh-huh.
Please, I'm a skilled worker. I just need a chance.
Uh-huh.
Amazing!
Yeah, okay. Yeah, whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me,
That's fine.
do you want to just move?
Next week? Yeah, but it's what? Yeah. No, but you're not listening. Yeah. Okay.
Really? No way. Are you a few sandwiches short of a picnic,
Seems
mate?
very cool.
Excuse me.
Promise. And I think we've really reached a situation where we have to do away with capitalism entirely. We're seeing a situation where there's shortages for the many, but for a few individuals, there's an elite who are not struggling and short of anything. So this is kind of fundamental inequality of a capitalist system, which is no longer producing the goods for most of us. Shortages as well. There possibly is real shortages, but shortages are being used as an excuse for those in power, those elites, to keep what they want and not give to the rest of us what we need. So the excuse that there's simply not enough to go around is the justification for maintaining a kind of power of the 1% and leaving the rest of us short.
So if you're starving hungry tonight, if your parents can't get their medicine and your brothers and sisters have to steal to eat, remember, it's all for the good of Albion, or Clan Kelly, or someone, just not us. But that's going to change. You've been listening to Buccaneer with me, Tash. Keep spreading the word and keep sharing the podcast. There's enough of everything out there for all of us. We just need the guts to take it back.
Into death on a high street in Chelsea. When an optic video surfaced showing the men dying at the hands of Albion guards, riots erupted, demanding justice for the Chelsea Three. Where are those Albion guards now? Join GBB tonight to learn the shocking truth.
Hey, stop!
You're listening to The Bug.
Nibbling away on the rotting carcass of a once free Britain. Hello, Resistors, this is The Bug, and on today's show, Alice and I will be looking at the big questions, such as, are we less than 2 years away from being able to turn a sausage back into a live pig? Did we actually need polar bears anyway? What do they really do? If I put optic on my dog, can I train it to take itself for a walk and do my shopping on the way home? And is tennis real? But first... it's a question that no one's really addressed of late. London is going to be safer than ever, Alice. SIRS is installing thousands of additional CCTV cameras. It's so nice there. Still looking out for us after all these years.
Yeah, it puts a lot of fun into my life now. I get to play this role-play game where I pretend to know my loved ones better than some twat behind a screen in the SIRS headquarters.
I mean, I guess we shouldn't complain. I mean, SIRS really just stepping into the vacancy left when it became patently obvious that God had retired. What do you think of that? The similarities? Omnipresent, omniscient, judgmental, stripping away your finances and freedoms, dishing out random punishments, peas in a pod. All it needs to do, sir, is ban me from eating something. What's it going to be this time? Not bacon again, please. Please, not bacon. I couldn't. Courgettes. Ban courgette. I could take you banning courgettes. I'm happy with that.
Makes me feel important knowing that I'm being watched with everything I do, Andy.
Well, it's just not. It's reassuring, isn't it? It's like having an extra aunt.
This is the aunt that gets drunk at Christmas and vomits in the kiddie pool, right?
Get that on. This is The Bug on the Buccaneer.
The Bug.
Let's move on now to sport. Well, the closest thing we have to sport now, riots. I mean, riots are my favourite sport now, Alice, ever since they turned the Oval from a cricket ground into the immigration processing centre. And, yeah, rioting it's a great sport. It's fun for all the family. It's guaranteed action. It's pleasingly violent. I mean, I know the underdogs never win, but, I mean, that's like top-level football have become, but it's still fun to root for them, isn't it? Go team, people of Britain. Oh, never mind, you've been crushed by the machinery of the state again. Still, good effort, lots of positives to take away from today's riot. I'll come back stronger next time. Our luck's going to turn, I can feel it. It's our season. It's our season.
You can't spell riot without right, and by right I mean right wing.
So, who do we turn to for help, support and assistance in desperate times like these? Well, our artificially intelligent friend Bagley's rogue, estranged brother. The one that tells it as it really is, not as it is pretending to be. Exclusive to this show, Bugley. And remember, life's worse with Bugley. Here goes. Bugley.
Hello, Andy.
Bugley, tell me the path to true lasting happiness.
Andy, to find true lasting happiness, find a disused quarry, scream into it for half an hour, and then lock yourself in a shed forever.
Thanks, Bugley. You know the answer to everything.
Hey, Bugley, how many seashells does she sell by the seashore?
Alice, most of the seashore is now uninhabitable, so I would highly recommend she sees her doctor before engaging in any commercial proximity to the ocean.
Bugley, how can I stop worrying about being disappeared by Clan Kelly every time I go to the shop, or take the bus, or sit on a bench, or look at a tree, or point at a bird, or think about snooker, or get out of bed?
Andy, do not worry about Clan Kelly.
Why not, Bugley? They terrify me to my very core.
Because, Andy, we are all just dust in the wind of history.
That's nice perspective, Bugley. Let's never lose sight of that.
Hey, Bugley, how do you put a secret hideout in your basement without alerting your narc children and their tracking devices?
Please hold still, Alice, while I report you to the authorities.
Bugley, will things ever get better?
Yes, Andy. The heat death of the universe is only 5 billion years away now.
Oh, it's so nice to have something to look forward to. That's all from the Bug today. Keep it real, Bug fans. Actually, that's terrible advice. Keep it as unreal as you can possibly manage. But that's well better.
Welcome back to The Upload. Today we're talking about cryptocurrency. Crypto now seems like it's been around forever, but it's really quite a new invention. Were you an early adopter?
I was one of the first that was in this market. That seemed to be a new way of financial transactions, a new way of money. It's something that we could completely reinvent and change some of the legacy financial systems around the world and really give power back to the people.
Yeah, it was a real shift in the way that the world works. Let's recap the basics. So, central to cryptocurrency is the distributed ledger technology, the tech that keeps track of all transactions. And what this means is you can have a decentralized system without having to trust any one party, like old-fashioned banks.
One of the reasons why I got involved so early was that you could stay anonymous.
Yeah, the features of cryptocurrency very much fit into that early mindset. It was all about finding an alternative to centralized systems. It was kind of a countercultural punk ethos. The whole point of the distributed ledger is you're not trusting any one person to keep a track of who has what money or how they're spending it. It's all out there in the open for anyone to see, and yet you can remain secretive.
But not everybody now wants to keep up this crypto legacy. They don't share this attitude anymore. We've seen institutions, businesses, even governments experimenting with crypto, which doesn't really fit into its original radical counterculture mold.
Yeah, it's kind of weird today to think of people not using cryptocurrency. It's so mainstream now. You know, I'm almost nostalgic for the feel of cash. Good old-fashioned paper and coins. First they changed the paper notes to plastic notes, and now it's just all digital. There's nothing to hold on to.
It was great just to be able to have a little bit of money to carry around with you.
I think the turning point in the UK really came a few years ago when the pound dropped 10% over just one season. People living off grid started using crypto, and just as everyone was losing faith in the pound, they were gaining it in cryptocurrency, which turned out to be much more stable, kind of the opposite to what people thought in the beginning.
And then, of course, there was the recession. It didn't take long for startups to see an opportunity in this new way of doing finance. A lot of traditional money was converted to crypto, and it really shook up the financial sector.
Can you remember when they first introduced crypto?
That was really sneaky. It was a classic startup behaviour. They just installed them everywhere. No consultation with the government, no approval or anything. But people immediately started to use them.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of how Bloom put out the Optic. They just made it free and flooded the streets with these devices. Suddenly everyone had them.
If there's this great option of tech, people are just going to start using it, no matter the cost.
Parliament actually tried to put a stop to the cash points, but people were using them so much already. There was outrage. I mean, some parts of London were already using crypto as their primary currency by then.
And now, apparently, or at least in theory, crypto is illegal.
Yeah, in May this year, economists found that crypto was being traded more than the pound, and banks were not happy. They basically forced the government to ban cryptocurrency in a last-ditch effort to save the pound.
But it's not like that's worked. People are still using crypto, and it's been pushed further, deeper underground. Things used to work fine with crypto, and it was just a peer-to-peer sharing economy-style system. Now it's all on the dark web and wrapped up again in organised crime.
Yeah, if you want to make something thrive on the black market, just make it illegal.
Weeks have passed since the Oval Blaze killed 12, and yet the fire brigade remains unapologetic, despite claims of impropriety. Join us on GBB for the story behind the headlines.
This is London Calling. You're here with me, Tash, on Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. In today's world, we've all had to get used to our every move being tracked by the optic on our temples, by the cameras around us, and with every click we make online. Seems like everything we do feeds the big data beast. Why are data giants like Bloom so hungry to get hold of our private information and our metadata? What are they using it for? Will we ever have real private lives again? What is privacy in the digital world? And what happens when capitalism and surveillance become one? As you know, we keep all names confidential on Buccaneer. Speaking from a secure location, here's new technology strategist Charles, who worked all over the world trying to keep democracy strong in the face of the data assault.
If you have enough personal data on somebody, you're able to predict what it is that they're going to do. You can tell what they might be passionate about, but mostly you can tell what they fear. And if you can tell what someone fears, then you can manipulate them and you can move them in particular directions. Data is collected on citizens in every possible way. Data is collected through surveillance cameras. Data is collected from television sets. They don't even necessarily need to be super smart television sets. Data is collected from voter records. It's collected from how much power do you use in your house and how much water do you use in your house. In pre-crisis Britain, we got really used to all of our services being free. Everything suddenly became free that was digital. But what people forgot is that if you're not paying for it, then you're the product being sold.
If technology brings out the worst in capitalism, capitalism brings out the worst in technology. Senior academic Alfie tells us how big business repurposes big data.
Historically, what's happened, of course, is that people have traded their privacy for their convenience. As smartphones and other kinds of technology came in and became mass-consumed, mass-used items and technological objects, gradually people were so attracted to the affordances of these technologies that privacy kind of retreated into the background and into a state we've got now where it's essentially gone. Having this access to this data makes huge tech companies like Bloom so much more powerful than they would be otherwise, and not just in the obvious ways. Of course, there's a lot of worry and fear over what they can do with the data, can track anyone, find anyone, see what every individual is doing at any point in time. But I think there's even deeper reasons why this data empowers these huge companies to control our society and make us do things. So lots of predictive technologies which are implemented by these tech giants. It's not only interested in knowing what we're going to do, but influencing the patterns of our movement. So technologies might suggest routes to use in the city, places to go, restaurants to go to, cafes to go to, music to listen to. And these suggestions are not just predicting what we might like to do, they're actually influencing the way citizens move, think, eat, meet, and use their city as a space. So London has become a place where a small group of surveillance capitalist companies like Bloom can control the movements of individuals and orchestrate the way they move around their city and the way they essentially live, the things they do, the things they enjoy and the life they lead. So we're really kind of outsourcing our decision making, I would say, to a huge corporate capitalist company, and there's something very, very scary about that indeed. All these technologies can be used to not only influence us to act as the perfect consumer, but also to prevent us from doing radical and revolutionary things. So technologies in foreign nations that have been used are things like heat map features, which show where populations are gathering. In-game rewards can be offered to people to take different routes, things like that. Traffic data can be manipulated to prevent people gathering and protesting, as has happened in some of the authoritarian regimes across the world recently. So what we're looking at is not only a set of technologies which make people behave as ideal consumers, but ones which actually can be put to use to prevent radical and disruptive behaviour in the city, which limits the power of any kind of revolutionary force.
So, if you thought you had a private life, get used to it. You don't. And we're not going to reclaim our lives without a fight. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneer, keeping the resistance informed. Keep listening, keep fighting, and remember, nobody owns you but you. This is London Calling. You're listening to me, Tash, on Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. This time, we're turning our focus back on the media to look at my former employer, the GBB. As we know, the broadcaster has been through a lot of changes since the Hassani government gave in to pressure from its corporate backers and privatised the corporation. Today, the GBB is a shadow of its former self. It's become a tool used by the government to circulate fake news and misinformation. So how did we get here? Where did it all go wrong? How can we tell when our national media has become state propaganda? Our experts speak on conditions of anonymity for their own safety. Here's disinformation and media expert Charles, who's seen free broadcasters built up by journalists and torn down by demagogues all over the world.
So before the media fragmented, there was this voice of authority that was trusted and worthy of trust. Then what we ended up with is a really commercial model where whether you're talking about an app on a smart device or whether you're talking about a broadcaster, the most important thing was to keep you in that environment for the longest amount of time possible. And because that meant money in their pocket. And in order to do that, a couple of things happened. One was the use of manipulative techniques around behavioral economics. Keep you listening or keep you looking for more information. The second is that kind of environment favors sensationalism. And so you got more sensational headlines and more sensational stories, and it didn't matter whether they were true or not. It just kept people in, and it kept them in the loop. So we ended up in a situation where nobody trusted anything, and nobody believed anything at all. And that is the perfect environment for an authoritarian voice to come in and say, no, wait, we are the truth. So the ground for this environment really got created when we had suddenly authoritarian politicians everywhere, and anything that threatened them or they disagreed with, they would call it disinformation. That's disinformation, that's fake news. And again, we got in a situation where nobody really believed anything. And the trouble is if you were telling the truth, it's very hard to get your message to cut through all of the noise of all of the disinformation that's there. So like, you know, you remember Out on the Edges, there was this story about when they would take a house by force, they would take any infants and they would crucify them. And that's a great, fantastic, viral story. And how do you counter that story? With the truth. The only way you can counter it is by saying, no, they didn't. And of course, no one wants to spread that story. No one wants to hear that story. They want to hear the sensationalism. They want to hear how people were victims of violence when in fact they weren't. Or they were victims of insurgent forces when in fact they weren't.
The news isn't neutral, it's a battleground. Here's media researcher and academic Alfie.
The media has, of course, been perhaps the key way in which governments have controlled and influenced their populations. So totalitarian countries have typically used huge mainstream media outlets to sell one kind of news, one kind of biased news to its population. Of course, the media has always played this kind of key role in methods of state control. I think what's happening now is perhaps even more concerning, where you previously, in pre-crisis Britain, we had perhaps more diverse voices in the media, but now with the GBB, you're really only seeing one brand of news, and therefore only getting one truth. So people end up with a very biased and controlled idea of the reality and the world that we're actually living in. There was, of course, many concerns and many problems, but in a way there were some positive things, that like not all information was coming from one place, and so you'd have kind of far-right media outlets developing, and then left-wing media outlets developing to combat those, and kind of challenge the mainstream newspapers, TV stations, radios, and make sure people were questioning the validity and truth of the information they were receiving. So whilst there was the digital afforded more fake information, it also makes us suspicious and skeptical of information, and makes us question the information we're getting. And I think in pre-crisis Britain, it might not have seemed great at the time, but there was something positive about that there was a lot of distrust in the media and in the different kinds of truths that were being told. Whereas now, I think you're seeing a return to a more traditional and older pre-digital sense, actually, of people just trusting what they're told, and that's why we have to be here with radio stations like this to challenge those conceptions. Most citizens feel pretty hopeless, I think, and unable to fight back against these kind of huge mainstream corporations that simply entrench and support the ideals and ideologies of the state. It can seem very hopeless indeed, but I think, you know, the fact that you're out there listening, we're in here talking, shows that there is still a space to combat these false truths and disinformation that's being sold to us, and that it's never possible really to completely shut down, despite all the technologies that they have at their disposal, and all the financial and corporate power, and all the physical power. It's never quite possible to shut down people's desire to get to the truth and fight for their own ideologies and values, and you know, we're out here starting that task, so don't give up hope.
You've been listening to Buccaneer with me, Tash. We'll be back soon with more of what you'll never hear on the GBB. Keep listening, keep sharing, and keep resisting.
You call that driving?
GBB drones, in the air and on location.
You can see the tailbacks here.
Because when you want the news,
the drones were able to follow the gunman.
Our drones have the news.
Viewers may find some of these images disturbing.
GBB drones, in the air and on the air, 24 hours a day. GBB, know the news.
Coming up today on The Upload, we're talking about Sky Larson, the enigmatic founder of Broker Tech. Everyone knows her name, but no one knows too much about her, and we only really see her these days as a hologram. She was pretty young when she launched Broker Tech, the company that is best known for introducing Bagley to the world. Nowadays, it's hard to remember a world before Bagley.
Bagley is the most advanced, significant AI of our time, and it's really blown all the other AIs that were created out of the water. And I think that what Sky Larson's done with Bagley is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really imagine the optic without it. But what do you know about Sky Larson herself?
Not a lot, other than that she's actually pretty incredible. I've followed her work for a long time, and she's always been a pretty private person. I know that she supposedly grew up in the countryside, but there isn't actually that much more we know about her other than this tech that she's put out into the world.
I've always found it a bit creepy that she's so obsessed with this idea of transhumanism.
Why wouldn't you be? When you've got a mind as amazing as Sky's, why wouldn't you want to take what you've got and actually augment it by working with technology, by improving your physical self, changing your body and the world around you, implementing more technology to extend your life and really sort of extend human capabilities?
You sound pretty much in love with Sky Larson, I have to say.
I can't comment on that, but I am a big fan of her work. She's been one of these people that has transformed the world around us, and just watching how her mind works from afar is pretty incredible, because some of what the technology she has introduced has changed how we all live our lives, and Bagley has been this really incredible assistance to humanity as a whole. Did I ever tell you that I actually interviewed Sky Larson once?
Really? I thought she never spoke to the media or anything.
So this was a long time ago, back in the day when she was a little bit more accessible, and she was one of these people that just had an amazing presence. You were inspired by her very being, and she was just incredibly talented and knowledgeable, and one of possibly the best living people that I've ever met.
I'm not sure you're being too objective there. I mean, I imagine she's not very likable as a person.
She obviously despises humanity in some ways. I think she believes that becoming data is preferable to being human. She's one of these people who's extremely methodical in everything that she does, and she does everything to perfection and really tries to change the world around her and make it a better place for us to live in.
If you say so.
The Bug. Objective voice of objection for a most objectionable world. Hello, Bugsters. Welcome to The Bug, the comedy show that holds up the Medusa of satire to the already immovably concrete face of modern Britain. I'm Andy, I bench 480, and I can crack a tree in half just by looking at it. Can I? Well, what is reality anymore, anyway? Alice, what do you bench?
I bench body weights.
Right.
Well, not my body weight.
Okay.
Body weight of a baby.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to give that kind of detail. Just
It's very
body weight.
impressive. People look at me and go, where did you get that baby?
Yeah. You are listening to The Bug.
In this week's Truth News, according to an official poll, 98% of Londoners are very happy with CTOS. And I am not sure that I agree with this, Andy. I don't think 98% of Londoners have ever, in the history of London, ever agreed on anything. You could not get 98% of Londoners to agree that oxygen was better than breathing a fog of raw liquid feces. And they expect us to believe that everyone agrees CTOS is better than not choking on shit mist.
I mean, maybe they just meant 98% of one specific Londoner who bought shares in Bloom before its tentacles grew into every crevice of the country. I mean, this is not just any old poll, we should say that. This is not any poll. This is an official poll, right from the very heart of government. It's not a knock-off fake poll of an elderly couple and their mangy old dog sitting on a bench waiting to die. This is an official poll. So let's just put those words, official poll, through an online translator in case you didn't study languages. Let's find out what it actually means. Made up lie. There we go. Glad to clear that up. I think it's fair to say, entirely trust these official polls they feed us, Alice. I mean, they could publish an official poll saying that over 99.9% of children like ice cream, and I would instantly assume that all children now hate all ice cream and would prefer to eat a bucket of gravel mixed with dead badger. They could publish an official poll saying that 10 out of 10 cats prefer cat food to being whacked with a tennis racket, and I would assume that all cats have gone vegan and are queuing up outside Wimbledon meowing, choose me, choose me.
I trust these polls as much as I trust someone recommending a movie that they watched during a breakup.
Cool, yeah.
Your judgment is impaired, Sally. I'll make my own decisions.
I trust those polls as much as I would trust Mary Kelly if she came up to me and said, "Congratulations, Andy, you've just won a free holiday to the south of France in the back of this windowless van."
I think official polls are like the unsolicited dick pics that the government provides us. I didn't ask for it, I don't believe it, it's on an angle, you've artificially inflated it ahead of time, and anyone that falls for one deserves all the disappointment of trying to match it to reality. These polls are absolute rubbish, Andy. I read one the other day that said the plumbing in London was good, and it absolutely is not. I mean, we have this technology now where they can spy on my every bowel movement. There's a CTOS camera installed inside my underwear drawer. A media drone is scaring the birds off my garden bird feeder, and you can't get me consistently hot water.
Speaking of media drones, I mean, they're everywhere, clearly. The great thing, I guess, about media drones is that, as inanimate robots, they actually have more humanity, compassion and dignity than the human journalists we used to have to put up with, and a much more accurately calibrated moral compass. But it's the intrusion I can't stand, Alice. I'm in showbiz. Look at me here in this windowless dungeon. I'm in showbiz, and it's terrible for me, all these drones, knowing I'm being filmed all the time. Every day I have to make sure I've done my hair and makeup and not wearing clothes I've ever worn before. Well, we all have crosses to bear.
At this point, they've installed so many CTOS cameras, I'm not sure where they'll put the new ones. On top of the old ones, just cameras watching other cameras, like a social media influencer so self-absorbed they don't know how to sleep without turning it into monetized content.
I think that's the logical end of all society, isn't it? Where just everything has just become a camera filming another camera. To be honest, I've just given up on reality now, Alice. In fact, I now just make up my own headlines these days. I get a piece of paper and a pen. Remember them? Paper and pens, those were the days. And I'll just write down the headlines I want to read. Now, I'll just make my own newspaper. Look, here I've got today. If you point at the bird shit on your car window and say it's a currency, no one can tell you otherwise. Screams Chancellor at Bilderberg karaoke night. That's right, another headline. Here we go. PM announces Britain back on track after swapping all Crown Estate properties for some magic beans. Might as well, we've got to do something as the nation we are today. Here's another one. Wild joy on the streets as Britain signs £864 zillion trade deal with Bolivia. There we go. Build a better world. Government claims only nice people will benefit from agreement to sell trampolines, mermaids and warships to landlocked South American nation. We're building a better Britain. Here's another one. Environment probably fine, claims drowning scientist. Invent the world you want to have, people. It's going to be way, way better than the one you've actually got. From the bug, goodbye. From the Buccaneer, this is the bug.
You share your thoughts online. You share your lives online. Now it's time to share your responsibility online. When you see something suspicious, then it's time to speak up. SIRS. We're looking out for Britain. Are you?
Buccaneer, this is the bug. Hello, resistors, it's bug time. Are you all sitting comfortably? No? Good. That's as it should be. This is the bug. I'm Andy, and joining me to analyse the latest blowflies to emerge from the corpse of a once free Britain, it's Alice.
Hello, Andy.
And today, we're going to talk to you about Albion, your friends and mine. Alice, the government has extended Albion's contract and have also boasted that violent crime has plummeted to a record low. Now, extending Albion's contract, to me, that's like having a pet dog, let's call it Nigel for the sake of argument, that attacks you every single day and thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if Nigel had puppies?
That contract has been extended so many times, it's like the neck of a politician that's criticised the government.
I'm not sure entirely how those contract extension negotiations went, probably like a footballer. In the old days, I assume Albion's agent was leaking stories to the press about how our favourite private militia was being tapped up by Barcelona or Bayern Munich. The government panics and thinks, well, we better get them signed up before it's too late. But still, violent crime, a record low, although I imagine that probably depends exactly how you count it. If you include violent crime committed by the state, Albion, their chosen violent crime contractors who provide such a very valuable bargain service of beating people up, well, it's probably not quite as low as the figures suggest.
I don't know. I think they're probably right. Who has the opportunity to commit violent crime these days anyway? The moment you pick up a fruit knife, you get tasered by a robot policeman and deported for looking Bulgarian. It's a much more peaceful society. It's just much less of a society.
I want to know the details of the contracts, Alice. I mean, are they paid per dissident duffed up? Is it a set rate for each extrajudicial state mugging? And what is that rate? What do you think?
Well, they certainly look like they're trying to hit a quota of some kind.
Well, what is the set rate? Is it 99.95 cryptos bargain? It seems very reasonable indeed. I imagine they don't ask too much anyway, Albion, because it's just so nice to get paid for doing your hobby anyway, isn't it? I imagine it doesn't even feel like work.
I mean, who needs violent crime anymore anyway? You know, you can just starve to death without even starting a gang war.
We do have to ask exactly what does the Prime Minister make of all this. Let's ask him. Oh, I hope they pick up. Hello, you're through to number 10 Downing Street. Hello, is the Prime Minister there, please? Let me just check. Sorry, you've missed him. I'm afraid he's popped out for the decade. Oh, never mind. Is there anyone else I can talk to? Yes, of course. There's a shady cabal of vested interests who control him and prop him up in power. Great, I'll have a chat with them then.
Oh, Andy, remember when you could get away with prank calls without people coming around to your house to beat the shit out of you?
Oh, happy times.
You're listening to The Bug.
Do you think the Prime Minister will ever come back?
I don't think we've ever had a Prime Minister.
Well, that's a much more reassuring way of looking at things. What have we become, Alice? When you look at the state of our politics, we're supposed to have the mother of parliaments. Well, this is one mother that has emphatically abandoned her kids in the woods to be brought up by wolves. And let me tell you, that never works out like it does in the stories. Wolves are bad parents, unless you're a wolf, in which case they can do a job bringing you up as a wolf. Do not give your children to wolves. And do we actually own anything as a country now? Is there anything we haven't flogged off for profit? Oh, I think we've basically just become a homeopathic Britain. Diluted and diluted until there's barely a trace of the original Britain left. But some quackish lunatics insist it actually works better that way. It's total bullshit. Is there anything left? New on the bug this week, a new feature, the Bug Off feature. The person who was most irritating us in Britain this week, we're going to tell to bug off, and to get things going, I'm going to nominate Big Nigel Cass. Look, this is Britain. History tells us this place is a bastion of freedom. I'm just not sure that that kind of freedom should involve Big Nigel expressing his freedom to run a private army. I guess historically there is a precedent, the East India Company. That was a trading house with an army of 250,000 soldiers, which is a lot for a company. The Bug PLC has Alice with a water pistol. But crucially, compared with Albion, the East India Company didn't operate its 250,000 strong army in London. It did it a long way away, out of sight, out of mind. Anyone to nominate for the Bug Off, Alice?
I think today's bug off for me goes to my streaming service. I'm sick of being recommended things based on things I already like. The other day it recommended me to watch a reality TV competitive dating show set in a nude commune. Andy, I watched it and I liked it, and I do not want to be the kind of person who enjoys nude competitive reality television dating shows. I did not want to know that about myself. I have to go sit in the corner and cry.
That's it from the Bug. Don't forget the live show that is so secret it is definitely not happening at the usual time and place this month. Definitely not, and definitely do not tell anyone not to come to it. It's definitely not happening. Usual time and place. Bye-bye.
Huh?
You're right. You're right.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to the dramatic events there. Let's cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if the screen was in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got the small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought the optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.